Peekaboo!
Sonic R, a 3D mascot racing game originally released in 1997 for the beloved but sadly ill-fated Sega Saturn console. Now this game has got a lot of negativity over the years, but is it really as bad as some reviewers make it out to be? Well, to be honest, I think it's an okay game.
You what?!
Enjoyable, but not brilliant. But it certainly isn't bad either. Why do I think this? Well, I'll now discuss that in today's video. So, here we have Sonic R, the Sonic game that has had a lot of negativity over the years for quite a few different reasons. The graphics, the controls, how short the game is, the music. There could be more depending on who you talk to, as everyone has different tastes. But underneath all this, I can see an okay average racing game, which tries to stay loyal somewhat to the formula of the Sonic franchise. It isn't the worst Sonic game out there, even though some reviewers might try to make it out to be. As a matter of fact, there seem to be quite a few people out there who can enjoy this game for what it is. Like me. But to say it's the worst Sonic game out there? Let's not forget future games that came out after Sonic R, like this one, or this one, and let's not forget about this one. It isn't the best Sonic game out there, but it certainly isn't the worst. However, to be fair, I can understand some areas to why some people might not like this game. I mean, the game is definitely very short. You cannot argue that. Only 5 courses, and it can be completed in less than an hour. Now, keep that in mind, as when this game first came out, according to the Sonic Retro website, Sonic R cost nearly £45 here in Europe, and almost $50 in North America. Which is pretty insane when you think about it. I mean, what other 3D games could you get for that sort of money back in 1997, and were much bigger and better experiences? The Sega Saturn version of Resident Evil? The Sega Saturn version of Croc? Or even, how about Crash Bandicoot 2 on the original PlayStation? And yes, I know I used the PlayStation game example there, but my point is, there were bigger and better games out there for that price range at the time.
Shut up and take my money!
Now, the controls are definitely not the best, and depending on which character you choose, the controls can range from best to worst. However, and this is just my opinion, the racetracks are quite open and seem to somewhat be designed with these controls in mind. I guess it's similar to how loose the controls are in Sonic Heroes, but even with Sonic Heroes' loose controls, it's still classed as quite an enjoyable game to play. Talking of enjoyable, despite all the negativity that Sonic R has got over the years, when this game first came out, nearly every review magazine associated with reviewing Sega games and tech were giving it high praise at the time of its release. As a matter of fact, I have got one official Sega Saturn magazine where Sonic R was the game on the front cover, and it simply states, "It'll blow your mind. Sonic R." And inside the mag I got, it even makes reference to a previous issue where the reviewers said that not even the PlayStation can do this sort of graphics. Saturn does what a PlayStation can't play? That doesn't really work. Now, I say that the Sega Saturn magazine states this, but looking at the letter section of the mag, I can see a slightly concerned reader, and his letter reads, Dear Sega Saturn magazine, regarding Sonic R, issue 22, check out the amazing reflective effects. PlayStation can't do this. Sorry, Sega Saturn magazine, but that's bullshit. Sure, it looks great, and I can hardly wait for the title, but do you honestly believe that the PlayStation can't perform this effect? You're showing a real lack of knowledge if you do. You also state in the same issue, during your Sonic Jam review, that the graphics in the Sonic World section easily rival those of Mario 64. Have you seen Mario 64 in action? Don't get me wrong, I was well impressed with Sonic Jam, but the graphics of Mario 64 are in a different league entirely. The new 4MB RAM cards could help to replicate some of the effects seen in Mario 64. Come on Sega, pull your finger out. And more so, come on Sega Saturn magazine. None of us want to see the Saturn fade into obscurity, but you must be honest with your readers. Statements like the aforementioned are reserved for the sad Amiga owners who can't come to terms with the fact that their machine is dead. Matt Belcher. Damn. Someone's pissed. Now, I can understand this reader's concerns for the Sega Saturn and it competing against the original PlayStation and Nintendo 64, as we all know now what the Saturn's sad fate was. And we also know now that 3D wasn't the Saturn's strongest point, and it was more of a 2D powerhouse, with 3D added in later in development. However, this reader's letter? Damn, man. However, on the brighter side, here's two responses from two editors of the Sega Saturn magazine, Lee and Rich. Clearly, it is your knowledge on the subject, Matt, which is, to use the vernacular bullshit. Direct your attention to last month's interview with Traveller's Tales' John Burton, where he stated the misting technique, where the backgrounds fade into view, would drop the frame rate to about 10 frames a second or less on the PlayStation. The reflective water would be virtually impossible to achieve, and the Saturn has better Guru shading, giving much smoother lighting. As for your second point, we've all played Mario 64 to the point of boredom, which is why we feel confident in saying that Sonic World's engine is more than a match for Mazza. If anything, Sonic World's environment is more densely populated and more detailed than those of Mario 64, without the eye-bleedingly blurry graphics. Lee. Moving on to Rich's reply. Maybe directly comparing Mario 64 to Sonic World is a bit off, as the Sonic team use a combination of 2D and 3D to achieve their effect. But the overall effect is extremely similar, minus, as Lee says, the crap MIP mapping, which always makes me think I'm completely short-sighted. Oh, the 4MB RAM card is exactly that, extra memory. It would not help replicate effects N64 does with hardware. Rich. So, moving on to the gameplay, in the Grand Prix mode of the game, which is basically the main part of the game, when you enter Grand Prix mode, at first, you are given the choice of 4 characters to choose from. These characters being Sonic, obviously, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, except Amy is in a car, of course. You may also notice that Dr. Eggman seems a playable character as well, or Dr. Robotnik, whichever you prefer, but you can't play as him yet. That is because you have to complete the game first to be able to play as him. You may have also noticed as well that in the shadows there are 4 other characters available. Now, you have to unlock these characters, which I'll explain how to do in a bit. These characters are Metal Sonic, a creepy Tails doll, which seems to be basically the mascot of the game in its own little way, and the thing of many memes on the internet. There's also Egg Robo from Sonic & Knuckles.
Oh no!
finally, Metal Knuckles. Anyways, moving on. At the very beginning of the game, once you've selected the character you'd like to play as, you are then given the choice of 4 courses to choose from. These courses being Resort Island, Radical City, Regal Ruin, and Reactive Factory. There is a 5th unlockable Radiant Emerald course, but you can only unlock that once you finish first place in the other 4 courses. Talking about the actual gameplay now, the gameplay is very simplistic at its roots. You basically race against 4 rival characters in a course of your choice. There's 3 laps to the course, and you must try to finish first place. It's that simple, really. However, you may have noticed, or if you haven't, I'll tell you now, there are 2 other hidden objectives. You may have noticed on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen that there is a 5 Sonic tokens counter. This is because in each of the courses, excluding the final Radiant Emerald, there is 5 Sonic tokens that you must find. Once you've found them, I believe you've got to finish either 3rd, 2nd or 1st to be able to unlock this bonus feature. But anyway, this bonus feature is basically, do you remember these unlockable characters I was telling you about earlier? Basically, this unlockable feature is you race against the unlockable character. On the same course, do a 3-lap circuit, but because he's the only character that you're racing against, you must basically finish first, you must beat him. He's basically like the boss of the game. And once you've beaten him, come first place, whatever, you are then able to play as him. You can select him in the character selection menu. The other objective of the game? I mean, who can forget about the Chaos Emeralds in the Sonic game? But yes, the Chaos Emeralds are actually featured in Sonic R, and they are hidden within the 4 main courses, again excluding Radiant Emerald. And how you get them is they're basically behind certain unlockable doors, which you can only unlock with a specific amount of rings. Basically, you use the rings as currency in a way. You collect either 20 or 50 rings depending on which amount that the door requires to be unlocked, and then there's a 50% chance really that the Chaos Emerald would be located behind the door. And you have to find them and finish first place to be able to actually get them. If you don't finish first place, you're basically teased on screen, thinking that you do actually have the Chaos Emerald, and then it's just like one big middle finger to you. It's like, ha ha. Although, once you get all the 7 Chaos Emeralds, for the first time ever in a 3D Sonic game, you are then given the chance to play as Super Sonic, who is basically the best character in the entire game. He's the fastest, he can hover on the water for the longest. However, be prepared, be very prepared to lose friends if you play as him in multiplayer. And I say this because Super Sonic is basically very, very broken. Not glitchy broken, but he is just basically too powerful for the game itself. And this is one of the issues with Sonic R actually, it's the balance between the different characters. You got, I guess you could call it Class B, which is Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Dr. Robotnik. And then there's Class A, which is basically Metal Sonic, the Tails doll, Egg Robo, and Metal Knuckles. And then you got, I guess you could call it Class Super, which is basically just Super Sonic himself. He's basically in his own category. You just cannot win against him.
What an asshole!
Unless you're basically a very, very bad player. People think that Monopoly destroys friendships? No way, man. Sonic R destroys friendships much more than what Monopoly ever would.
Fuck you, asshole. Fuck you, asshole.
Talking more on the class system of the Sonic R characters, just because you got all these different characters in these different classes, Class B, Class A, and what I call Class Super, although Supersonic is the only one in that category, so there's no real point talking about that class. Just because you got all these different characters in these different classes doesn't mean that they're all balanced exactly the same way in each class. Take Amy Rose and Dr. Robotnik for example in what I call Class B. They are probably two of the worst characters to play as in the entire game. Their handling is poor, their speed is very slow, and even though they can hover on water, they can't hover on it for very long. I mean, really, you might class that as an advantage to take a shortcut, but just play as Knuckles, Tails or Sonic, because Knuckles can glide, Tails can fly, and even though Sonic can't travel as far as Knuckles and Tails, he can still do a double jump, which will probably get you probably about half the length of what Tails and Knuckles would do, whereas Amy Rose and Dr. Robotnik probably not even a quarter of the length of what even Sonic could do. The other special moves I forgot to mention is Amy Rose also has a boost, which she can use at the cost of 10 rings, although she usually starts off with a boost at the beginning of each race. But don't, please, it is really that bad. I mean, you get the boost, but the handling goes completely bad, you can hardly control yourself. There's also Dr. Robotnik and Egg Robo with their head-seeking missile, again at the cost of 10 rings, which will basically, attack the nearest player basically. There's also Metal Knuckles, who obviously can glide, just like Knuckles. And the creepy Tails doll. Although the Tails doll can't fly, it can hover over the water without losing any of its speed like the other players can do. Another little flaw with the whole class system is the way that the game will somehow arrange the characters. Let me try to explain a bit more. Let's say you've unlocked Metal Sonic and the Tails doll in Class B, but you still haven't unlocked Egg Robo or Metal Knuckles. Basically, if you play as Super Sonic, basically the characters will range from, because you've unlocked Metal Sonic and Tails doll, they will be definitely two of the characters that Super Sonic will be racing against. Basically, it's like going down the class ladder, basically. But because you haven't unlocked Egg Robo and Metal Knuckles, the game itself will randomly pick one of the Class B characters. And sometimes, I haven't experienced it myself, but sometimes the whole picking system can be really weird. I mean, I've heard, and I've also seen people on YouTube say about it, where they've picked Super Sonic, and let's say they've got Metal Sonic and Tails doll because they've been unlocked. Then you'll have like a character like Knuckles, which is okay, because obviously he's a Class B character, but then, taking in mind, they've picked Super Sonic, the game itself will also put normal Blue Blur Sonic in the race as well, so there's two Sonics. I mean, that's a bit of a misled thing, isn't it? That was a bit of a... must have been just forgotten about in the programming. They must have, they must have been on that deadline or something. So, okay, I've talked about the many different special moves that you can get for each character, but now it's time to talk about what items that you can collect, which are hidden around certain areas of each course. Basically, like Mario Kart, we had to run over these specific item boxes. With Sonic R, there's these specific item panels located around certain areas of each track. And like those Mario boxes, when you run through the item panel, it's basically a gamble on what item you would receive. And the items can range from you just getting 5 rings, then there's the 10 rings, the 20 rings. There's also the Fleet Feet, which is basically a speed boost for your character. And funnily enough, referencing back to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, or Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, there's also the Water Shield and Lightning Shield available in this game. And basically they do the same thing, well, kind of. The Water Shield in Sonic R basically lets you run on the water until you stepped off the water, then you lose the Water Shield. And the Lightning Shield can basically magnetically collect the rings for you. Now, The real downside is you don't get those special moves that you did when you collected these shields back in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, or Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So that is kind of a downfall on these shields. I mean, they do their job, but they're basically shadows of their former selves. They're not as good as the previous main games, but they do actually get the job done, if you get what I mean. They're not bad, but just be wary that you won't be able to do things that you could do back in those older Mega Drive games. And again, I mentioned this earlier, the other things that people seem to like to moan about with Sonic R, excluding the how long it takes to complete the game, is the music and the graphics. Now, the music, that's fair enough, because everyone has their own taste in music. And I think we can all agree that the lyrics don't really fit the Sonic franchise like that, really. I mean, songs about love and relationships isn't really something that you think of when you think Sonic the Hedgehog. But the graphics, personally, it's like, are you actually kidding me? The graphics aren't that bad for a Sega Saturn game. I mean, granted, there were better looking Sega Saturn games out there at the time, like Resident Evil. I mentioned this game earlier when I was talking about the price range of what Sonic R cost at the time. But for a Sega Saturn game, I would say the Sonic R graphics are actually pretty good. I mean, they're not brilliant, I think we can all agree on that at least, but the graphics are actually quite good. I mean, we all know now, and I think even the developers back then knew it, that the Sega Saturn was a very hard system to program for. And I personally think Traveller's Tales did a good job of producing the graphics that they did for Sonic R. It isn't the best looking Sonic game out there, but it certainly isn't the worst either. Moving on to a different topic, did you know that hidden deep within the actual game manual, there is actually a story to this game? Yeah, that's a strange one, isn't it? Anyways, the story goes, I won't go too much into detail, but you'll see why later. Basically, Sonic and Tails were on vacation on this island in the sun somewhere, and they come across this road sign which advertises for one great big racing competition, and the prizes are the Chaos Emeralds. Anyway, ignoring the Chaos Emeralds, Tails thinks that this is a great opportunity for Sonic to show his speed, and Sonic's there thinking about it, and he notices that Dr. Robotnik is written at the bottom of the sign. So he clearly thinks, Dr. Robotnik is up to no good again, I need to stop him, and he decides to enter the race. But what they didn't know is, thousands of miles above, Dr. Robotnik was watching them from a satellite. And he's there thinking to himself, this is my biggest and most evilest plan yet. I am gonna destroy Sonic once and for all.
Eggman's got his groove back. I'll have to give myself a promotion.
Anyways, and then he looks out into the distance of his, I'm assuming he was in the Death Egg or something.
What? Fingers?
And there's these 4 characters there in the background. His 4 evil creations, Metal Sonic, Tails Doll, Egg Robo, and Metal Knuckles. And they are all ready for the race to destroy Sonic.
That's the coolest fucking story I've ever heard in my entire life. That's insane. Can I hear it again?
From what I can gather, it seems like it's trying to replicate what the original Mega Drive games did, where you had a beginning to the story at the beginning of the manual. But the main problem is, I'll basically try to explain it as best as I can here. Imagine if you've read this manual, expecting a really good story to this game, but basically, with this game, the game itself doesn't actually mention anything about the story. I mean, let's say you've played the game, you've done all 5 courses, and when you get to the end of the game, you just get that thank you for playing notice. But you've just played straight through it, you know, you haven't collected the emeralds or any of the tokens, so you thought, oh, okay, I've got to basically try to 100% complete this game. And you do that again, and then basically once you finish that final course and select exit, you're presented with this screen. It's literally like, what the hell, is that it? I mean, people who didn't actually read the story, because like I said, it's hidden in the manual, and it's sort of like 50-50 on who to actually read the manual in the first place, you know, they probably won't care about that still frame ending. But if you actually read this manual, expecting a decent story and a decent ending, which is basically, I know, let's talk about, say, Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 on the Mega Drive. They had a story in the manual at the beginning, but the beginning of the story wasn't presented at the start of the game, just went straight into the level. But with those games, they actually had a decent-ish ending to them, whereas this, you just get a still image. I mean, what the hell, man? That's a bit like if Sonic 2 didn't have the whole animated scene at the end, and it just had a picture of Sonic and Eggman hugging each other at the end. It's like, what the hell, man? And talking a little bit more on the graphics of Sonic R, a year later, after the original Sega Saturn release, there was actually a port released for Windows computers, and this port improved quite a few things. The resolution was much more crisp, the colours, in my opinion, were vastly improved. There was a weather system added in, which you could toggle in the settings menu. My personal favourite was basically the snow and ice weather setting, because that meant you could take alternative routes in the courses. Basically, you could run on the water because the water was frozen solid. And probably the biggest improvement of all, which most people seem to recognise, was the draw distance. Whereas in the original Sega Saturn version, the sprites would fade into view as you got close to them. Whereas in the PC port, the sprites you could actually see from further back, and I think Sega and Traveller's Tales would actually agree with me on that the PC version was the superior version, that is. Because years later, Sonic R was re-released yet again as part of a classic Sonic game collection known as Sonic Gems Collection. Now this collection was released for the Nintendo GameCube and the Sony PlayStation 2, if you lived outside North America, that is. Because for some baffling reason, in North America, Sonic Gems Collection was only released for the Nintendo GameCube. I don't understand why, to be honest. I mean, I love the Nintendo GameCube personally, but I think we can all agree that it wasn't the best-selling console of that generation. The PlayStation was clearly selling much more numbers than what the GameCube was selling. But anyways, this port was basically a port of the PC port of Sonic R. And I think Sega knew at the time that the PC version, and indeed now the Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation 2 version, but whatever, the PC version was the far superior version. It was basically Sonic R v 2.0.
Whoa!
And what else have I forgot to mention? Oh yeah, the time attack mode. Basically, when you go into the time attack mode, there are 4 different challenges available there for you to choose from. The first one obviously being the main time attack challenge, which is you run around the course of choice by yourself and try to get the fastest time that you can within the 3 laps. There's also the reverse time attack challenge, which is basically the same thing, but you're running the course in reverse. Actually, thinking about it, that should have been implemented into the Grand Prix mode, to be honest. I mean, think about it. You could have had 2 separate acts on each course, first act being racing the normal route on the course, act 2 being you racing the reverse way of the course, and then there could have been an act 3 as well, which could have been the where you race against those unlockable characters. I mean, I'm not saying you should have got rid of the 5 coin system, but think about it. you could have had 5 coins to locate on both Act 1 and Act 2, and then once you found all of those coins, so once you've collected all 10 coins in each course, then you would unlock Act 3. I mean, it's just a thought, isn't it? I mean, it's too late to do anything now because the game's been out for years, but if they did something like that, that could have made the game just a little bit more longer, 2 hours instead of 1 basically. And there's the Get 5 Balloons challenge, which is basically there will be 5 balloons hidden around the course, and you gotta try to locate them within the fastest time that you can. But to be honest, I found this challenge quite challenging, to be honest, because, well, put it this way, I think the Resort Island course is the easiest one for you to do that challenge in, but all the other ones, because they're quite big or bigger than Resort Island, they are actually really well hidden. I mean, put it this way, when I was capturing footage for me to do for this review, I chose to play the Regal Ruin course, and I couldn't find all the balloons basically. I was there playing as Metal Sonic, just because, and I was in there for quite a long time trying to find all the balloons. They were really well hidden, and I could only get 3 of them. And the final challenge available in the time attack mode is the Tag 4 Characters challenge. Now this one I personally found to be the most enjoyable of the 4 challenges, and what it is, if you can't tell from the actual title of the challenge, is have you ever played Tag or It as a kid? Basically it's that. On the course of your choice you would have 2 characters run off in the normal direction of the course, and you also have 2 other characters running off in the reverse direction of the course, and what you've got to basically do is chase after them and tag them to tag them out of the game. And you've got to do this, you've got to tag all 4 characters in the fastest time that you can. There's also a multiplayer mode where you can basically race against one of your friends in the Versus challenge, or basically race against them in the Pop 5 Balloons challenge, but basically you got to locate the balloons to pop, and whoever pops the most out of the 5 wins. Although, I say you can race against one of your friends, but in the PC version, unlike the Sega Saturn one because it's only got 2 controller ports, the PC version, you can actually race up to 4 players, so basically you can either race 2 players, 3 players, or 4 players. Now, I'm no expert on multiplayer gaming on a computer, but could you imagine 4 people being huddled around one old brick of a computer trying to play this game? As let's not forget, this game came out in the mid to late 90s. Oh, and there is a save feature as well. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'll leave up to you, because obviously the game is so short, but yeah, it's there if you want it. Anyways, back to what I was saying earlier, there seems to be a lot of people out there on the internet who seem to really hate this game. I mean, I personally, myself, I enjoyed it, but I bought this game really cheap at the time. I bought it on a cheap PC re-release copy, brand new, for $9.99 in my local PC World store. And at the time, I enjoyed the game. I mean, I still like it today, but maybe I like it because it was cheap, and I also think of it as like a cheap and cheerful game, if that makes sense. Whereas people who bought the game when it first came out on the Sega Saturn paid 3 times or even 4 times more than what I paid for my copy on PC. And like I said, this game can be completed in less than an hour. Is that good money for your buck? I mean, not really, but in a way, the game itself is sort of like an arcade game. You've only got so many courses, and you can only finish so many courses, obviously. That's basically probably the best way to think of Sonic R, really. It's like one of those short little classic Sega arcade games. I mean, yeah, people will say classic, that's debatable, but yeah, think about it. You've got so many courses, and you've got to try to finish first place. That's like most of the arcade games, Sega Rally, Daytona USA, ignoring the counter and the checkpoints. I mean, think about it. It's not really that bad. The graphics weren't bad for the time. The music, I mean, whilst it might not be your cup of tea, it certainly isn't that bad. I mean, there must be some love for the Sonic R music in a way, because recently T-Lopes has come out and made an official remix of Can You Feel the Sunshine? You know, one of the many minds behind the classic, or soon-to-become classic, Sonic Mania game. I mean, he was mainly on the audio side, but that's besides the point. He is one of the fans who helped make Sonic Mania, by the Mania, for the Mania. But anyways, an official remix approved by Sega themselves, and we know that because we've all seen it on their Facebook pages, the Sega Facebook page, the Sonic the Hedgehog Facebook page. But anyways, and there does seem to be a lot of people out there that do seem to really like this remix just by looking at the comments on YouTube or Facebook itself. And it's not like T-Lopes just came to Sega, you know, for the money. He basically approached Sega, along with Christian Whitehead, as fans of the actual franchise, and the money that they're getting is basically just like an added bonus in a way. I mean, yeah, have a listen for yourselves. And finally, coming back to the gameplay, to sum up what I've been saying all along, well, I think the game is alright. So, to sum it up, Sonic R is a very underrated, not classic, but is an underrated old spin-off Sonic game. And personally, I think if you have not played this game already, you should give it a shot. Maybe not the Sega Saturn one, because that is really expensive to get hold of now, even though it was expensive back then. But if you can find the Sonic Gems collection, or a cheap re-release of the PC version, then you should go for it. Give it a try. You won't feel too disappointed. I mean, it's up to you to decide yourself whether you hate the game or not. But, ignoring the price range thing, decide for yourself. Give the game a chance. It isn't that bad of a Sonic game, really. I mean, people who said about, oh, it's the worst game ever, have they seen all the other glitch-fest, unfinished Sonic games that came out in the later years? I mean, that basically says it all, doesn't it? At the end of the day, you decide whether you like it or not. But, I think, it's probably like, it's not 50-50, it's probably more like 75-25. 75 being that you'll like the game and 25 being that you'll dislike it. So yeah, go on. Give it a shot. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.